to start by introducing our panel tonight. So we have three of our investees joining us. We're so grateful for them to be here, and they're going to discuss how they approached adaptation, innovation during the pandemic. So I'd like to introduce Lisa Brooks, the Executive Director of babygoround, Sophia Suderman, the Executive Director of Petal, and Wayne Leslie, the CEO of the Down Syndrome Resource Foundation. Thank you so much for being here. And I hope that to start that you can all give us just a quick overview of the incredible work that you do and share some of the challenges and changes that you've experienced. So Lisa, why don't I start with you? If you'd like to just share with us maybe an overview of babygoround and some of the work that you've been up to this past year and a bit.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So babygoround provides under-resourced families in the Lower Mainland with resources and essential baby gear so they can safely care for their infants and toddlers and thrive as a family. And we do that by collecting new and gently used equipment and cleaning it and making sure that it's in good working order, and then distributing it to the families that are referred to us by a really wide network of health and social service organizations throughout the Lower Mainland. We've also just recently started offering some online resources for families. We started with two topics, injury prevention and childhood first aid, and those were so well received by the participants that we're going to be doing more of that and rolling that out over the next year. The three main impacts that we are finding that we have are to reduce parental stress, and that's really highly linked to better developmental, educational, and social emotional outcomes for children. Of course, to reduce financial stress, so being able to access all of the items free of charge allows the families to pay for rent and food and other household expenses. And then we're also able to create a really positive environmental impact by diverting items that would go to landfill earlier than if they came to us. So last year we saw just over 1,100 families, and we diverted 25,000 pounds of waste from going to landfill. So this past year has been one of huge growth and huge change. Of course, the biggest change was in how we deliver services. Families used to come into our on-site and meet with a staff or a volunteer and choose the items that they need and then leave with them. Of course, we couldn't do that. And so we moved those conversations that we used to have in person with the families. We now have them over the phone or via Zoom, so that the families still have the opportunity to talk about what they need, what their preferences are as far as color or gender or make model, and how they're going to use those things. And then we put everything together in a bundle and arrange for the families to come pick everything up with curbside pickup, contactless. And then so much change. We've onboarded a new electronic client information system, which allows us to move to a paperless model, but also this year, most importantly, allowed us to access all of our client records remotely from home, as those of us who are working from home. We adopted a new fundraising CRM platform. We've developed lots of new marketing materials and video. We've increased our social impact measurement and how we're sharing that information. We diversified and increased all of our funding streams, so from foundations, from individuals, from corporations. And we also really changed the way that we're working much more closely with other organizations that are serving some of the similar populations. And it's interesting to think about this past year without SVP's investment in us. It allowed our organization to move to a full-time leadership model. And so all of this organizational development and change that we've been able to accomplish this last year really is a lot to do with our involvement with SVP, both funding and also with the input and advice and just walking alongside us that our lead partners have done. So certainly thank you so much, and happy to be here tonight.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you for sharing that. And now I'd love, Sophia, if you could share a little bit with us about Petal. I know much of Petal's programming is and was in person, and so you had to navigate distancing restrictions. So love to hear more about both Petal and this last year and a bit.
Okay, thank you, Helen. And yes, we do most all of our programming in person, so I may end up having to put this mask on if someone needs to enter the office. But so I'm with Pedal and our community bikes. You may know us as, we're on the corner of Main and Broadway. And so we promote the use of bicycles as a healthy, affordable, and environmentally sound form of transportation. So basically, we're helping people get where they need to go. We do this through a variety of programs. And then we also offer education and mechanical skills to empower people and to enable their access to community services and opportunities. So we have our community bikes, which is our social enterprise on the corner of Main and Broadway. And through our social enterprise, we provide affordable transportation options, but we also employ people that are underrepresented in the industry. And we provide work experience for youth and people with disabilities. And a large part of, well, everything that we do, really, we are taking bicycle donations, having them refurbished, and then reintroduced back into the waste stream. So similar to what Lisa was saying about Baby Go Round, we are removing items from the waste stream and getting them back, making them useful. So we have our community bikes, and then we also have Bike Club, which is our youth drop-in program. And so in this program, it's a very low barrier program, and it offers opportunities to learn mechanical skills, to learn riding skills, to develop leadership opportunities. And they can actually, well, previously, where it's kind of changed for the moment, people were able to build themselves their own bike at no cost. So that's our Bike Club. And then we have Pedals for the People, which provides free bikes and also subsidies for maintenance for young people and adults facing financial barriers to make sure that they have access to transportation. And then a new program which formally launched this year is called Gear Up. And so that's an employment training program for at-risk youth. And that's in collaboration with the YWCA. So we're doing that. And then there's also been, there has been, and there always is, fun little other side projects and collaboration. So actually, two cool things that have come up recently is that we've been able to provide bikes for a program with Red Fox, who is another SVP alumni. And we're also working on getting some bikes for KidSafe as well. So lots of fun connections there. But that's kind of an overview of what we do. But this last year with COVID, we had to make so many changes. So some of the things that we did were, for employment training, we had to go from group sizes of like cohorts of 10, splitting them into smaller groups of 5 so we could properly distance. We had to do really change the programming in the shop and the use of our space. We even have to limit the amount of staff that can be working in the shop. So we actually have our shop now being scheduled around 80 hours a week. We've also taken a lot of our shelving and stands and put them on casters so that they can move and we can open up the space. I think as a lot of other groups have done, we've done a bit of a mix of some online programming with some in-house programming. And then a cool thing that we've done with our youth program is actually kind of put the ball in their court and said, what do you guys want to do? Because we've been pretty collaborative with that program anyhow, but within the certain structures of what was already in place. So it's been nice to kind of pause and just say, hey, like, what is really important about this, and where do we go? So those are some of the changes and some of the things that we've been doing.
Great, thank you so much, Sophia. And then Wayne, I'd love to hear a little bit about the DSRF and what you've been up to these last 15 months.
Perfect, thank you. Very happy to be here. For those who may not know as well, we're based in Burnaby. DSRF is British Columbia's leading Down syndrome service provider. We provide a wide variety of education and health services for children, youth, and adults. This includes highly specialized one-to-one reading and math instruction, speech language therapy, occupational therapy, mental health services, and adult group education programs that ultimately are designed to prepare our clients to live full and fulfilling lives in the community. 2020 actually marked our 25th anniversary. No, a pandemic was not in our original celebration plans. However, we are very much celebrating the fact that one thing the crisis did was it reaffirmed just how essential DSRF is to BC's Down syndrome community. 2020, exceptionally challenging for DSRF, as it was for most charities. I'm sure my colleagues would attest to that. However, now that we're finally seeing some light at the end of the pandemic tunnel, I'm very happy to share that thanks in part to SVP's dedication to us, we're very much poised to come out strong and with expanded services and more support for families. So our team had to significantly redesign our programs and services, but in a matter of just a few weeks, our team really pulled together and were providing our essential services, whether it was health or education, online. These virtual services open the doors for more families by allowing us to, for the first time, directly serve clients outside the Lower Mainland. And our services, including the virtual services, continue to be a lifeline for families. The pandemic led to creation of a number of new resources. This includes the launch of 321, Canada's first and only Down syndrome magazine, The Lowdown, a Down syndrome podcast, and a host of other resources based in particular around family needs to educate at home. We also really critically made a successful transition of our virtual services that led to the same similar transition to our very complex fundraising events that are major contributors to the 90% of the portion of our budget that we have to raise every year on our own to do our work. And that wouldn't have been possible without the investment of SVP, which in particular helped us take what was a dual communications and fund development position and turn it into two standalone positions. We're tremendously grateful as a result to be coming through the pandemic, not just surviving, but ultimately thriving. And this has been made possible by the overwhelming generosity of faithful supporters like the investors and the partners at SVP who believe in the importance of what we do. And you've continued to invest in individuals with Down syndrome through some very trying times for yourselves. We're positive. Today, we're looking forward to a future that we believe is brighter than ever because our ability to empower individuals with Down syndrome, thanks to your help, is greater than it ever has been. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Wayne. And thank you to all three of you for sharing this and for your relentless and tireless work these last, gosh, how many months are we on now? 16 months? I've lost track a little bit, but I just want to say to you, to the three of you, and to all our investees on the call today, my gratitude for all that you've done during these incredibly difficult times, and the innovation and adaptation you've shown. So one of my first questions is, you've had to make a lot of changes to your programming. Lisa, you now have an online store, and you've moved a lot of your infrastructure online. Wayne, you have you moved to a virtual platform for servicing your servicing your clients, and then Sophia, you've had to significantly change how you do things in the store. How do you think these changes are going to, how do you anticipate this is going to impact your future programming? Will some of these things stay? Will you go back to how you've done things in the past? What have you learned and developed from the adaptations and changes you've had to make that will you'll keep going forward to hopefully impact the children and youth that you serve? And then, because we're not here in person, feel free to just unmute yourself and go first if you'd like with the question, and don't feel you have to answer the question if you don't have an answer.
Yeah, so certainly for us, we're really excited about the online resources that we're developing for families. It's something that we've been kind of thinking about, and just the climate of Zoom just kind of gave us permission to just do it, and it's been really successful and well received by families. And then I think we're going to end up with hybrid kind of models. We'll take back the really rich pieces of the previous service delivery model, and we'll keep some of the really efficient pieces that we've developed through COVID.
Well, and I can add for DSRF, it's definitely the transition to virtual services, which for us marked a real turning point. It was something that we had on our strategic horizon, but we thought it was probably 2 to 3 years down the road for a number of reasons. Number one, certainly you're pivoting to a virtual world with speech language, occupational therapy, mental health services. Those are pretty complex to deliver online. And then we believed not only would that take time, but we felt that in normal circumstances, families would be saying, you know what, let somebody else be first on the dance floor for that. Like, we thought that the uptake from families. So it ended up being a silver lining in the crisis, because it forced us to pivot very quickly. And then very quickly, even though the time out of our service regimen was very short, relatively speaking, families were so happy you're here. Because it was at a time when schools were closed. They had absolutely nothing. So the families they just ate it up. And now it will stay as a hybrid. In particular, as I mentioned, the ability to service areas outside of our normal closer geographic area where people typically come for in-service. So we're talking about developing services expanding to the island, to the Kootenays, the Okanagan, and the north.
And I would say for us, we are still kind of grappling with the idea of what things will look like on the other side of this. Obviously, for the physical space, with the changes in regulations, it's actually, we spent so long putting all these things in place that now we're scratching our heads that we have to undo it. It's kind of funny, but it's been really cool to, like, as we've had to really shrink down the sizes of things, it's given us the opportunity to maybe provide services to less, or programming to less, but actually I would say a deeper level of programming, where our time with them is more like more one-on-one support, or maybe not one-on-one, but smaller group support. So like, especially with mechanical training, that's really valuable and really assists the learning process. We're building deeper relationships. Like I kind of mentioned with Bike Club, it's the opportunity for youth to even have be more empowered in their role within the group. And so there's been a lot of benefits. And I think we will be slow to see what the transition out of this looks like to us. Definitely many things, there are things that we would like to keep. And then there are things that just, as far as demand goes, we'll have to kind of open things up again. But it's actually been, as hard as it's been, as challenging as it's been a really amazing opportunity to kind of strip back everything that we do and then get an idea of like what's really important here. It's been very, I guess, eye-opening period for us. So.
Great, thanks, Sophia. Thanks, Wayne, and thanks, Leslie, for those great answers. I'm curious, with the pandemic, the pandemic has shone a light on a lot of inequities that we already knew existed in our community, but really put a magnifying glass on them. And so I'm curious what you think is the most important change our sector needs to see that's been brought to light as a result of this pandemic.
I don't know if it brought it to light for me, but it certainly pushed me into really working collaboratively with other organizations. SVP kind of helps facilitate that for sure, but I think even outside of SVP, we've been reaching out and working with other organizations and really making sure that people aren't falling through the cracks, and that whole no wrong door kind of thing. So when families are coming to us and it doesn't make sense for them to receive services from us for a variety of reasons, we're trying to make sure that we're helping connect them up with other organizations.
Well, I know that for DSRF, one of the things that we have sadly realized is what we knew really anecdotally, that as we emerge from COVID, the regional inequities in services have become very, very clear. BC's Down syndrome population is a really good example. So for those who might be less familiar, 1 in 750 people are born with Down syndrome. Canada's population rate for Down syndrome is estimated to be between 45 and 50,000. Based on general population statistics, we estimate roughly 4,000 people live in British Columbia. So one of the challenges the Down syndrome community has is even within the greater disability population, which is still a relatively small proportion of the overall Canadian population, it's a small little wedge that often is forgotten about, marginalized. they deal with inequities on many different levels, but they're most pronounced in communities outside the Lower Mainland because of the general lack of access to the types of service that highly specialized organizations like DSRF provide. But that's something, again, we're feeling quite good about, because now our transition has allowed us to start chipping away at the edges of the accessibility question. So there's some light at the end of the pandemic tunnel, even when it comes to those inequities.
And I would say from our perspective, I mean, inequity and the inequity in our society and systemic racism has really been highlighted this past year and a bit. And our community bikes has always operated with a strong anti-oppression lens. That being said, with a renewed focus and kind of internal view, like pausing to really survey what is going on around us, we acknowledge that we have a lot of work to do. And I think that for us specifically and internally looking at ourselves, it's highlighted the fact that although we do make a lot of efforts in our hiring to make sure that we are representing groups that are underrepresented in the cycling industry, that still is, if you take a closer look, and especially with shifts in the last little bit of staffing, that the higher you get up the power structure within our organization, the wider it gets. And so it's something that really, causes us to pause and take a look at why it's like that, and then how do we change that. And I don't have the answers, and it's part of this process that we're learning and reaching out to other organizations and resources to support us in this journey. But yeah, it's something that in spite of our efforts, this is where we find ourselves. And so how can we create, how do we start with us first as an organization and try to create a more equitable employment and operational organization. So we're on a journey.
Hey, thank you again to all three of you for sharing such great answers. At this point, I'd like to open it up to our partnership to see if you have any questions for our panel. I recognize that we are running just a few minutes behind, but I still do want to make sure that there is opportunity for anyone to ask any questions. So you can either raise your hand. Well, I can't see it if you raise your hand because I can't see everybody. So you can use the reaction function in chat, in Zoom, to raise your hand, or you can pop it into chat. Okay, so doesn't look like we have, oh, Trista, we've got a question.
This is a question for, I guess, probably a little bit more Sophia and Lisa, but perhaps Wayne as well. COVID caused a lot of disruptions to supply chain, and both babygoround and Pedal are kind of tied to that in terms of providing resources to people, and also sourcing, components like bikes. If I recall, at the start of the pandemic, there was a bike shortage. And I'm sure that Lisa, you experienced that as well. So I'm curious how that sort of impacted your ability to both source materials and also the demand you saw for materials, and how you navigated that, and how things are looking for you now, because in other industries, the supply chain issue is still ongoing.
I'll let Sophia go first.
So yes, Trista, very true. There's supply chain issues everywhere, but I think we all know that people are going bananas for bikes right now. And so we've absolutely seen it, and it's no joke. And the shortage started last year during the spring, and the industry still has not caught up. So there's things that are back ordered for a long time. So in result, so there's that compounded with the the demand for bikes and the need for transportation. Some people don't feel comfortable going on the bus, and people are immunocompromised. There's so many elements to it. And so we've seen a dramatic increase in bikes, and we have actually kind of outpaced our donation streams. So it's something that is, it's pretty urgent for us as an organization right now. If things like, we're at the beginning of spring and we have 30% of the bikes on hand that we normally do, we've increased our free bike distribution by 40% this last year. And so we kind of are at the place where if we don't see more of these donations come in, it does threaten our programming. So we've been working, we have different collaborations to be doing some bike drives coming up with the farmers market, with Arc'teryx, with the North Shore Mountain Bike Association. So it's been an opportunity to collaborate and try and increase our exposure in the community. And so, yeah, we're doing what we can. We're making ends meet, but there's a real need. And I feel like we, as an organization, and like where cycling is and being at the beginning of the season, we're just kind of entering the red zone per se, where it's we've really got to see some action to make sure that we can continue to provide these vital services to the community moving forward.
Yeah, and for us, it's a little bit different because families are still having babies, and there are the families who bring us their items are continue to bring them. And so the supply chain sort of that is experienced worldwide around new items doesn't really impact Baby Go Round, because most of the items that we give away come to us by donation. Interestingly, we've been able to actually increase the number of items that we collect. And part of that, we think, comes from, we used to accept items any day that we were open, but because of social distancing, we had to create specific donation days so that people weren't dropping things off at the same time that a family was picking their items up, because we don't have the space for that. And having dedicated donation days and really pushing those out through our newsletters and through social media has increased the items that we're able to collect. So it's actually kind of weirdly been a positive thing for us.
And DSRF, I would add, has actually and still is challenged by supply chain issues, but interestingly, the human resources supply chain. So we compete with two key public sectors to hire our therapists and our teachers. That is the Health Sciences Association and the education field. So we work very hard to be very competitive, and we are, but it's we've struggled to close the gap, and it gets a little wider every year. And that has made it challenging to hire, especially with high demand fields like occupational therapists and speech therapists in particular. And what we've noticed now is the pandemic has compounded that, because people have also been very fixed. So there's a nervousness, there's a feeling of, you know what, I just need to batten down the hatches and stay tight. So one of the challenges we're facing right now, if I could go out and hire 2 more speech therapists, another occupational therapist, behavior consultant, I would. I'd do that tomorrow like that. Can't. There's just that we can shop for them, but it's a real challenge. So our scaling issue that has always been there because of that competitive aspect we're talking about, and we're working on revenue models to address that, has been compounded by the pandemic. So it's the human resource supply chain for DSRF that's more challenging now.
Hey, thank you. It's so interesting to see the different things that have, a ripple effect throughout, not enough bikes, more baby gear, and we don't have enough people to hire. Like, it's really incredible to see the different things that
DSRF had to buy a lot of plexiglass, a lot of plexiglass.
Yeah,
there was a time when you could not buy plexiglass. So there were other in motion supply chain issues at the same time. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much to our three panelists. I guess very quickly, before, I know we are a little over time, so before we wrap up, before we close, if there's anything that partners can help you with, if anything SVP can help you with, please share it now, or be sure to share it with us later. So if there's something that SVP and our partners can help with, please let us know. If any of our bike enthusiasts have some bikes sitting around in their garages. So, Sophia, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I mean, if you have bikes that are underused and you want to get them back out into the community, we definitely can put them to good use. But I actually was looking for a chance to just say thank you for everything that you have already done for us. And I don't know that this is really the place for that, but I want to make sure I don't miss it. But early in the pandemic, I received a call from Gina, and it was she just said, hey, checking in, how are you doing? And I just wanted to say, like, that was so meaningful in just such a moment of chaos. It was so early on, and I was so in the thick of this problem solving and trying to figure out what was going on. And I really felt supported by SVP, not just through that phone call, but through the work with the partners, through the funding, through the relationships. And that was just another extension of that, yeah, so I just want to say thank you. Like, we are now we went through our final, I guess, meeting to graduate us into an alumni this past year. And so I did want to just take the opportunity to say that your investment in our organization has been huge. So thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. Thanks for sharing that. Great. Okay, so Wayne or Leslie, anything just quickly in closing remarks, or anything that SVP can do for you or our partners can do for you?
Well, I'm happy to say that you're doing stuff right now. We're working with SVP Partners on a big rebuild of our website, which, as my director of communications constantly reminds me, is now a digital portal, I think. So big plans for it, more than just like, oh, let's make the website prettier. It's integrating our virtual services so families feel like they're not going off site and those sorts of things. We're tapping into some expertise, and we've made some connections that we could have only found through SVP. I know we're working with Megan to shore up our social impact reporting, so that's fabulous. And like Sophia, I just want to thank you. I talk to David and John periodically throughout, and I've made it very clear to them that on many occasions, when the organization performed well above its weight class and really it came through in a way that it did, it was in many ways responsible stewardship that was the result of the work we did with SVP. That the foresight and the belief in our plan to split our communications and our fund development. I guarantee you, the communications played such an important component in the pivot to our virtual services, because while the therapists and the teachers and we're all working on the nuts and bolts, our director of communications was really shoring up the platform on which it would run. So that was absolutely amazing. And then at the same time, because we now didn't have a dual communications and fund development person, we had a dedicated fund development person because of that SVP investment. My fund development person could concentrate on figuring out how the heck we're going to raise, 90% of a $2 million budget in a pandemic, so that we didn't have to turn around and say to the staff, you've got a great service, but we have to lay you off. We can't afford, because the majority of our budget is people, and the people who literally deliver our services. So for that, DSRF is extremely grateful to everything that SVP has brought to us. And I'm glad that we still have, at least we're in the third year of our third year arrangement. So we've still got some time, and I'm going to squeeze John and David for everything they've got for the next 6 months or so. So thank you.
Thank you, Wayne.
Yeah, and certainly I've already sort of mentioned some of the ways that SVP has already helped us. We're working now to increase our social impact measurement and share that and also some HR pieces. And the next ask will be around helping us a little bit with our website. I didn't know that was an option, so excited to hear that. And yeah, so just thank you. And yeah, it's truly amazing, actually, you know, as a new executive director, to walk into an organization that is connected to SVP. It's pretty amazing, because NED can be a pretty lonely role, and just having that networking and that support is really amazing. So, yeah.
Well, thank you to the three of you, and please, everyone, if you can join me in thanking our panelists for their time this evening and sharing their stories. It's much appreciated.